the country. We'll be also getting deeper analysis on some of the interesting numbers behind this very important sector. And you can, of course, share your thoughts on our Twitter handle at KTN News KE. You can also tweet me at Agina Abi. And remember to use our hashtag business today for this discussion on the mortgage sector. Well, in case you're just joining in, the mortgage industry, let's take a quick look at some numbers that we were able to prepare courtesy of our research team. And as we speak, as of now, Kenya's housing deficit is approximately 2 million units, and the number of units grow by 200,000 per year. This is according to the National Housing Corporation. Well, remember, our country's total population is standing at just about 50 million. So it tells you the housing demand is totally outstretched. Let's take a look at the next slide. Well, part of this matter has been brought about by the rapid urbanization of the population growth rates of around 4.0%, 2.2%. These are the number of Kenyans annually coming into the city. And on average, we are looking at 1.9% and 1.1%. Quite some startling numbers there. Let's move on to our next slide. Well, in regards to the housing deficit, what are some of the reasons behind the current deficit? Well, research puts the facts at inadequate supply due to the fragmented nature of the real estate sector, as well as high development and land costs. These have barred most of the aspiring homeowners in the city towards owning a home. And let's proceed on to some more statistics and, of course, some more reasons. The other major reason why the uptake in the country is pretty low is because of the concentration of the high-end markets, and of course due to lack of profitability at the lower end of the market, and definitely this occasioning of delays around the approval of building plans, as well as the delays in some of the counties such as Kisumu and Mombasa. So those are, looking at the broad picture, some of the key reasons why uptake hasn't been that good. Well, let's move on. Well, when you come to statistics touching on our urban city, that is Nairobi, and quite a number of Kenyans inhabit the capital city, home ownership in urban areas in Kenya has remained low at approximately 21.3%. Well, when you look at these numbers, they are very telling of the current situation in the country. And of course, let's compare this with other countries. If you can get to the next slide, where you'll be able to see that actually in South Africa, home ownership in the urban city is standing at about 50%. That is the latest data compiled from different institutions, including the Central Bank of Kenya, as well as Citon Investments and the National Housing Corporation. Well, looking at these numbers, it is quite real. It's quite touchy on the current situation in the country, where 2 million is the number of Kenyans who annually are growing in regards to accessing the mortgage market. Well, at this point in time, I'm joined by a legal expert who will be helping us dissect some of these key developments in the sector. And I'd like him to quickly introduce himself and, of course, give us your overall outlook for the mortgage industry in the country.
Hi, Abi. My name is Njuguna Muri. I'm a partner with MMTK Law, a law firm that practices in Nairobi.
All right.
And one of the things that we do as a law firm is to help buyers and sellers of property. We also help lenders who wish to lend money to potential owners of property to do the mortgage process.
All right.
The mortgage environment has been quite shaken, of course, by the COVID environment, especially in the last 1 year. It wasn't doing very well before COVID, that's before the announcement leading to certain closures in government offices and registries. Mm-hmm. But the announcement on COVID led to certain closures, and that seriously affected the mortgage business in Kenya.
All right.
Yes.
And as someone in the legal profession, is it possible to quantify how big a dent did this leave, especially to law firms that cash in when there are such transactions in the country?
Oh, I would say it was big. It was big. In fact, you would notice this by looking at how law firms are performing. And I would say that there have been several cases of law firms having to close their offices, others having to downsize. Many law firms that were mainly focusing on the property market have had to come up with new and innovative ideas, branching on to other areas. Because if you just rely on the property market only, you're going to suffer. Right now, yes.
All right.
We are hoping, of course, it's going to be better, but right now it's not very good. It's picking up, of course, with the opening of business, but it's not very good. It's not as good as it was this time last year.
All right.
Yes.
And let's drive the conversation forward. Of course, as legal experts, you are literally in the middle of all these transactions. You are like the intermediaries when it comes to handling transactions between a buyer and a seller. And looking at the current state of economy, like you rightly put it, that we hope things will be better. What are some of the new options that firms are looking into, considering that times have been quite difficult for many Kenyans?
As I, so I'm saying, if you just focus on the property market and the transactions are not coming in, and the children at home must feed, they must eat, they must go to school, you have to be innovative. You have to look for new revenue streams. Law firms are trying to be creative. For example, at MMTK Law, one of the things that we have done over the years is to help in estate planning and management. This deals with property. What we do is to help people arrange their affairs, because one day all of us will die. You die, you leave your estate, you leave your property. How will that be distributed to your beneficiaries? So we help people, for example, create a will and ensure that you're able to control your affairs even when you are not there. In certain situations, you may find that the will might not be the ideal instrument to handle your estate or your affairs. You may, for example, decide to use an instrument called a trust, where you can even you can initiate it even before you die, such that, let me give an example. You have a building which is generating rental income. You can ensure that that building remains unsold, remains in the name of the trust, but that income goes to your beneficiaries for many, many years to come, such that even when you're not there, the building is not at risk of being sold or being wasted away. That's one of the things that we are doing as a law firm, to be innovative and creative. And many law firms are having to do that.
Okay. Yes. And looking at the big picture, Njuguna,
yes,
there's a lot of concern on the cost of mortgages in the country.
Yes.
And comparing with the data we did see with South Africa, where in urban cities, close to 50% of homeowners, of people living in the city are homeowners, compared to Kenya, which is at about 20%, where majority of the population are still renting. And from your assessment, what would it take to bring down the cost of mortgages down? And what are some of the experiences you've had when it comes to the uptake as from a consumer side of things?
I think there are many factors. One of them, of course, is the property prices. In Kenya, I believe they are very high, especially the closer you come to the bigger towns. It's prohibitive. Most people cannot manage to buy that property. Even an eighth, you cannot manage to buy that property, because when you compare it to the incomes that people are earning, I mean, it would take you forever to earn that piece of land that you cherish. The other thing, of course, is the cost of financing, because the interest rates are, in my view, very high compared to the developed markets.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do the actual calculations in Kenya, it's definitely between 15 to 25% per annum in terms of interest rates. This is prohibitive, and most people cannot afford that. Of course, there are other additional factors, like the length of the transaction. It takes unduly long, in many instances, between application for that mortgage facility to the time that you actually finalize and get the title deed in your name.
Okay.
And for many people, that's a turn-off. Yes.
And as you've touched on a very critical aspect, that is the cost of mortgages.
Yes.
And when we look at the average price of accessing a mortgage in the country, as with the prevailing interest rates, which are about 14.5%.
Yes.
And comparatively speaking, when the cost of mortgages are high, and at the same time, all these are attached to the cost of land, the cost of construction.
Yes.
There's been talk around Kenya shifting its legal practices around the building code, where we should allow people to build houses that are fit for occupancy, at the same time consider different sorts of materials, from timber-made houses. There's new technology in the market touching on housing. I don't know, from the legal standpoint, how far are we in terms of pushing for reforming our housing and building codes to accommodate different designs of houses?
I think a lot of it is affected or influenced by market tastes. I think Kenyans, in many respects, are quite conservative when it comes to the form of housing, the type of building material, for instance.
You sure people want nyumba ya mawe?
Yes, they want something that they are sure that will withstand any kind of whatever weather. They want to say, I have a stone house.
Okay.
You don't want to go somewhere and say, I have a timber house right in the middle of Nairobi. No. Kenyans are very certain about that.
So is it a high
time
to have a paradigm shift?
I think it would be important to do that, but it's something that will take quite some while, I believe, because it will take some while. It will take some while. All right. Yes.
And back to our main area of focus, let's also discuss the worrying numbers, where we're seeing official reports indicate that during the pandemic, quite a number of investors had to discontinue servicing their mortgages. And from where you sit, what are some of the likely implications, legally speaking, that this has, especially on aspiring homeowners? At the same time, talk to us about what are the legal options in place to ensure you still safeguard your property.
Here's a long topic. Let's look at it this way. If you look at the timelines provided by the law with regard to from the point of default to the time of the sale of your property, assuming, for example, you got a loan and you are unable to pay it, and then the lender, the bank, decided to issue you with a very fast notice. From the time of the issuance of the very fast notice to the time that the forced sale of your house happens, it's about 219 days, 219. That's on a strict timeline, assuming there is no gap between the notices. We are talking of, there are about 5 stages. So from the very first notice, there is 40 days, 45 days, 90, there is a place where there is 14 days. That's assuming there is no gap in between those notices. But humans being the way we are, of course there will be gaps. There are times when maybe the customer will go to the bank and try to renegotiate.
Yes.
And 2 weeks or a month will pass. So the practical timeline between the issuance of the notice from default to the sale of the house might be 9 months to maybe 1 year. Now, let's look at the announcement regarding COVID, which was done in March, I think March 17th or thereabouts last year. Hardly a year has passed. I believe the government gave and helped in the issuance of a moratorium and suspended certain payments.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that people are not obligated to continue paying for their loans. So if default happened, serious default might have been seen later in the year 2020. So probably in the, after the second half, maybe you're talking about August up to December and continuing until now. If banks have started issuing the very first notice, the time for sale has not yet arrived. It means that later in the year, later this year, there is a very big likelihood of many houses, many properties being put on forced sale through auctions. First of all, you can already see the effect of what was happening before COVID. Right now, if you open the Monday and Tuesday newspapers at the back, you'll see many pages of auctioneers advertising properties for sale, forced sale. But that is not as a result of COVID, the COVID effect.
Yeah.
That's as a result of the economic environment that was there before COVID.
Sure.
The COVID effect is yet to be felt with regard to the forced sales and auctions.
All right.
It's coming.
It's coming.
And you'll see it later in the year. It's going to be serious, I believe.
Okay.
Yes.
And speaking to this issue as well, of course, it is one of the worst experiences for you to see your property being auctioned.
Yes.
And many a time, the banks are also not smiling when they come for their property.
They don't.
At the end of the day, they need to be accountable. They need to reap every coin to the last penny. And I'd like to hear your closing thoughts as well, especially touching on the options available for investors to still avoid an auction, because you've touched a very live wire when you're saying the COVID effects have not yet knocked back home.
Yes, with regard to the property market and the sale of properties, it hasn't happened. Yes. I think there are various options when one is pushed to the corner. And of course, it will usually arise because one has reduced income or has lost a job and stuff like that. But before one gets there, I think it's important for one to ensure that you have a good contract and you have gotten good legal advice when you are entering into a mortgage facility, so that you know what you're entering into, so that a lawyer also looks at your document and advises you and educates you on what could happen in case A happens, Y will happen. In case B happens, Z will happen. One needs to know that.
Yeah.
But the moment the bank gives you the very first notice, or even the moment that you know that you are not able to keep up with the mortgage repayments, there are various options. One of them is to restructure. And
by this you mean a longer period of payment?
In fact, I think I have two meanings. The very first one is you may have to restructure your life, man, because if you may have to forego that dinner you used to have. You may have to move from one estate. You may move from Runda to somewhere else, because that's what life is calling you to do. The next one is to restructure with the bank. You may need to visit the bank and see whether, for example, you'll be making smaller installments per month. That might prolong the mortgage, but it's what you might have to do.
All right.
Now, the other thing is you may have to, instead of, you see, whenever your property is sold at an auction, the law allows the bank to sell at 75% of the market value of that property. Instead of letting it get there, look for someone who can buy your property at a price that you can be able to determine. It's usually known as private treaty. You can do that.
All right. Very sound advice, and always a pleasure speaking to you in regards to this very important topic. Quite a lot of feedback coming in from our viewers, many still shooting their questions, and unfortunately because of time, we need to bring it to a close. I've been speaking there to Njuguna Muri, who is a partner at one of the legal firms in the country, that is MMTK law firm. Well, that's why we wrap it up on the business today. My name is Abegina. Let's catch up tomorrow for some more insights from the business world.